a nice glass of milk.
Oh, hold it, Ernie. Wait. You can't pour that milk because you're upside down. And when you pour milk, it goes down. It'll spill all over me, dummy.
I'm sorry, Bert. You see, I'm thirsty, so I'm going to go ahead and pour my milk right now.
No, hold it, Ernie. Please, don't. Weird. Oh, that's weird. Wow.
When Nintendo dropped its cast list for the Super Mario movie back in 2021, of course, Chris Pratt caught my eye. But another thing that caught my eye was Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong. And maybe not for the reason you think. I don't have any issue with Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong. I like Seth Rogen, I think he's funny. And I think Donkey Kong is a character that would fit his voice. But also, that is the first time Donkey Kong has really talked in a long time. And of course the boys made sounds and noises and stuff. That's one of my favorite parts of the recent games. But think about Donkey Kong 64. What's the most iconic clip from that?
Okay!
It's Donkey Kong talking, saying full English words, but he hasn't done that in a long, long time. And it exemplifies an issue I have with modern Nintendo's depiction of Donkey Kong. There's a certain charm of Donkey Kong's character, either before Rare touched him and after Rare touched him, that has not really carried through these recent games. And I think Illumination might be bringing that back. And I mean, that means Illumination is doing Donkey Kong better than Nintendo has been doing Donkey Kong. Which, as a Donkey Kong fan, is ridiculous to admit. And I really hope no one misconstrued this as me saying that Donkey Kong Country Returns is a bad game, or Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze is a bad game. They're not. They're not. In any capacity, I really don't think they are. It's just the depiction of the Donkey Kong character and the lore and all of that is just not up to snuff of the original Rare games. So, here's me talking about that right now, baby. Something a lot of people have noticed about the Donkey Kong design that Illumination is using is that it seems to borrow a lot from the 1994 Game Boy design, which I really personally like. I think it's honestly a design I like better than any Donkey Kong design, but it's important to notice that the 1994 Donkey Kong design was an attempt by Nintendo to revitalize the Donkey Kong character. Because when Donkey Kong was the original arcade game, he didn't really have much of a character other than being dumb, stupid, stereotypical ape bad guy, right? And as his appearance in the original Super Mario Kart seems to show, Donkey Kong Jr. seemed to be thought of as the more important character to really display the Donkey Kong franchise in. And yeah, that's completely fair in my eyes, because Donkey Kong never got to be playable in any of his games. He got top billing, but again, he was still just a generic bad guy. Donkey Kong Jr. was a protagonist. He was a character you rooted for and you cared about. Donkey Kong wasn't. So while Donkey Kong 94 didn't make Donkey Kong a protagonist, it made him a more fleshed out antagonist. Kind of like how Bowser transformed from a generic bad guy to having at least some personality in Mario World. Same kind of difference, where Donkey Kong is now becoming a more like a character and less just like a standard stand-in bad guy. So this is a vital step into the development of Donkey Kong Country, because first, Donkey Kong's Thai, and also now the audience cares about Donkey Kong. Now the character is a character, not just generic, like I've been saying like 3 times at this point. If they didn't do this, it'd basically be the equivalent of having Wart in Super Mario Bros. 2 and then making Wart's Adventure. Who would buy that? Who cares about Wart? But adding this extra step of character development, the stage for Donkey Kong Country is set. And when Donkey Kong Country released, it swung, and it went banana! I feel, other than, the game being a good game, a lot of the reason why the Donkey Kong Country games are remembered so well is that it also developed the characters in a way that Nintendo hadn't done previously before. Now there's a Kong family, a full extended Big Kong family. There's Cranky Kong, there's Swanky Kong, there's the Dixie Kong, there's the Funky Kong, there's the Kinky, the Candy Kong, all those guys. The original arcade game didn't have voice acting, nor did the Game Boy game for obvious technical limitations, but the SNES came during a time where video game consoles were finally able to produce voice acting and produce it semi-decently. And Rare took advantage of that. They took advantage of that and gave Donkey Kong a voice, they gave Diddy Kong a voice, they gave the Kremlings a voice, and made some of the most recognizable sounds in SNES history. Even though on the grand scale of the game, that's a really small miniature touch, I feel like I would not like the game as much if they didn't have those, and in my opinion, it's one of my favorite parts of the game. And it's so charming and so lovable, and it continues through all of the games. Once Dixie's introduced, they introduce sound effects for her. Once Kitty's introduced, they add sound effects for him. And in the final boss fight of Donkey Kong Country 3, it has this big, which makes it my favorite boss theme throughout the entire series, just because it's so epic sounding. It's so cool. It's character. This attitude traces the next big Rare game, Donkey Kong 64, with the creation of Chunky Kong and Lanky Kong, both very zany and goofy characters. But man, they display the zaniness and goofiness of the characters really well. And plus the instrument aspect they introduce in these games, bruh, sold these characters. They also experiment with full voice acting for the first time in Donkey Kong game, because, you know, the 64 hardware is way more supportive of that than SNES, and they show that with King K. Rool speaking in the first cutscene.
To keep Donkey Kong distracted, steal that hoard of golden bananas he treasures so much, and take care of his pathetic friends. This time there can be no mistakes.
I personally think the voice is a little bit goofy. It's the same kind of effect that Sunshine Bowser has, but nevertheless, this expands the characters in a way that the SNES games didn't. And of course, I'd be remiss to not mention the DK rap. This is another thing Rare did that I feel is so iconic with the Donkey Kong franchise, just because it's so funny and interesting. But explaining the characters in this way and in this comical nature shows the wit of Rare and how they wanted these characters to be depicted and treated. Nintendo didn't get that. And once the buyout of Rare by Microsoft happened, Nintendo really didn't explore these characters the same way that Rare did. It'd also be very dishonest of me not to mention this, but I also do not know very much of the Donkey Kong GameCube games. I did play Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, but I don't remember enough to make commentary on it, except I just remember not really caring for it. So this is going to be a general GameCubification of Nintendo thing, because that is a real thing. And people don't talk about it enough, but the charm of the N64 design of the characters generally went really just streamlined once the GameCube kicked in. The example I always pull up is Daisy. I love N64 Daisy so much, but I really do not like her design afterwards, which might be just a bad take on my part. Totally might be, but there's something special about N64 Daisy that GameCube Daisy doesn't have, and maybe a lot of designs don't have, that I just really don't notice. I think the transition for Donkey Kong is very noticeable because Rare had a very signature style on how they made their characters look. And even if they made aesthetic changes to the characters as they went along, generally they had the signature Rare style. But once Rare goes off the picture, everything's Nintendo-y. And just, I don't know how to describe that, but it's Nintendo-y. That is the description of it. Everything looks streamlined and clean in a way that it just makes it uncharming. This is why I hold strongly on how much I like Illumination's take. The Illumination models, of course, have the Illumination animation style, and I don't think Illumination is known particularly for their visuals, but the style of Illumination movies, for some reason, just really fit these Nintendo character designs really well. Also probably helps Shigeru Miyamoto's on board, and probably a lot of designers from Nintendo are on board with this picture. So it brings these characters new life and new breath that I haven't seen in Nintendo character designs in a long while. And it just makes me so happy as a Donkey Kong fan to see Donkey Kong shown in a way that does not devoid it of the iconic style of Rare or the styling of 94. Even though it's not like those styles and it's a whole new thing, it feels way more, let me say, out of a place of love and appreciation for the character than the modern redesign. And again, please don't take it as an insult to Returns games. When it comes to gameplay, when it comes to how the game functions and works, it is such a labor of love on Retro's part, those Donkey Kong Country games. But I still do not like the aesthetics that much in comparison to the original, and again, in comparison to these new redesigns. I also tip my hat for the inclusion of some rareware characters that haven't been in games for a while. Most importantly, Chunky, because I missed my boy. Swanky, there's Kitty. DK Jr., not really a rare character, but still. Oh my goodness, the Kong family is back together again. And I mean, I like this. I like this change and this progression, and I hope Nintendo keeps this energy in whatever Donkey Kong Country project they have next. I'd absolutely love to see these characters in a movie on their own. I mean, we're gonna be completely honest here. The movie hasn't came out yet as the time of recording this, but it's going to do well. It is going to do fabulously. So it'd be absolutely so meaningful to me if they made a Donkey Kong movie, or at least in the sequel, they have Donkey Kong be an important part, and these characters, they come back, and maybe even King K. Rool. I'd love to see what they can do with these characters and these new designs, and if they want to take some inspiration from these designs and put them into the games, brilliant. I would be completely on board with that. I hope you understand my point with this. This franchise, which is my favorite video game franchise of all time, it better change or I'm going to be really sad. Ah, Jeepers Creepers!